Daniel Carson stood in the center of the massive chamber and felt smaller than he had ever felt in his life. Above him, the curved ceiling stretched higher than any building on Earth. Around him, representatives from 40 different alien species sat in their designated sections. Each species had its own style of seating, its own lighting, its own atmosphere. The chamber was a marvel of engineering that allowed beings from different worlds to share the same space. But Daniel did not care about the engineering right now. He cared about the decision that was about to destroy everything humanity had worked for. "The vote is complete," Chancellor announced from his elevated platform. The leader's voice rumbled through the translation device that every human wore. Was massive, nearly 3 meters tall, with thick gray skin and 4 arms that he used to emphasize his words. "The Galactic Council has reached its decision regarding the human question." Daniel felt his stomach turn. The human question, as if his entire species was a problem to be solved. "Humanity will be removed from civilized space," continued. "You have 30 galactic standard cycles to withdraw all colonies, stations, and vessels beyond the outer rim. You will relocate to the Perseus expanse. The quarantine zone will be established immediately." The chamber erupted in sounds. Some species chittered in approval. Others remained silent. The delegation, crystalline beings that glowed with internal light, flickered in what Daniel had learned was their version of satisfaction. Only a handful of species seemed uncomfortable with the decision. Daniel took a step forward. "Chancellor, I must protest. Humanity has followed every regulation. We have honored every treaty. We have contributed to council research and defense. What crime have we committed to deserve exile?" His 4 eyes focused on Daniel. "You exist, Ambassador Carson, that is enough." "I don't understand." "Then let me explain in simple terms your primitive mind can grasp," leaned forward. "Humanity appeared in the galaxy merely 200 of your years ago. In that time, you have established colonies on 17 worlds. You have built a fleet of 300 vessels. Your population grows faster than any species we have observed. Your technology advances at a rate that concerns us." "Those are achievements, not crimes," Daniel said. "They are threats," replied. "You are aggressive, you are unpredictable, you take risks that more civilized species would never consider. You negotiate with violence as readily as with words. We have studied your history, Ambassador. Your species has spent most of its existence at war with itself. Now you bring that violence to the stars." Daniel felt anger rise in his chest. "We have not attacked anyone. We have defended ourselves when attacked, yes, but we have never been the aggressors." "Not yet," a new voice said. Daniel turned to see Commander of the Empire stand. They were reptilian with scales that changed color based on their mood. Scales were dark red, indicating confidence. "But you will, your species cannot help itself. You multiply too quickly, you consume resources too efficiently, you will eventually need more than you have, and when that day comes, you will take what you want." "That's not true," Daniel protested. "It does not matter if it is true or not," said. "What matters is that the Council has decided. The vote was 32 in favor of exile, 6 against, and 2 abstaining. The decision is final." Daniel looked around the chamber. He saw the faces, both alien and familiar in their expressions. He saw satisfaction, he saw fear, he saw indifference, but he did not see justice. "The Perseus expanse is a wasteland," Daniel said quietly. "There are few habitable worlds, resources are scarce. You are condemning millions of humans to hardship and possibly death." "Then you should have thought about that before you expanded so aggressively," replied. "The decision is made, Ambassador. You will leave civilized space or you will be removed by force. Choose." Daniel wanted to argue more. He wanted to rage against the injustice. But he was one man in a room of aliens who had already decided his species' fate. He took a deep breath and straightened his shoulders. "Humanity will comply with the Council's decision," he said. His voice was steady despite the fury in his heart. "We will withdraw beyond the outer rim. We will relocate to the Perseus expanse. But I want you to remember this day, Chancellor. Remember that you judged an entire species based on fear and prejudice. Remember that you cast us out not for what we did, but for what you imagined we might do." "Your words change nothing," said. "Perhaps not today," Daniel replied. "But history will remember, and someday you may regret this choice." Laughed, a sound like grinding stones. "Humanity will struggle to survive in the Perseus expanse. You will be too busy fighting for food and water to threaten anyone. In a few generations, you will be forgotten. That is the fate of species that cannot accept their place. Daniel turned and walked toward the exit. His footsteps echoed in the vast chamber. He did not look back. He could not bear to see the satisfaction on their faces. The message reached Earth 3 days later. Daniel stood in the government chambers in Geneva and watched Prime Minister Lisa Morgan's face as she read the Council's decision. Her expression did not change. She had always been good at hiding her emotions. "How long do we have?" she asked. 30 standard cycles, about 92 Earth days. Lisa nodded slowly. "It's not enough time to move everyone comfortably, but it's enough to save lives." She looked up at the assembled government officials. "Begin the evacuation procedures immediately. Every ship, every transport, every cargo vessel we have. Start with the most distant colonies and work inward." "Prime Minister," said Hayes, the military commander, "the Perseus expanse is largely uncharted. We don't know what we'll find there." "Then we'll learn," Lisa said simply. "Humanity has faced extinction before. We're still here." The evacuation began within hours. Ships lifted from a dozen worlds, carrying people and supplies toward the unknown. Families packed what they could carry. Scientists gathered their research. Soldiers loaded weapons and equipment. Everyone knew they were leaving the only home many of them had ever known. Daniel watched it all from the observation deck of the transport ship Unity. Below him, Earth grew smaller. Around him, other ships joined the convoy. Hundreds of vessels moving together toward the edge of known space. "They made a mistake," a voice said beside him. Daniel turned to see Lisa Morgan standing there. She had boarded the Unity just before departure. "What mistake?" Daniel asked. "They think exile is punishment," Lisa said. She stared out at the stars. "They think they're removing a threat, but they're really just setting us free." "Free?" Daniel could not keep the bitterness from his voice. "We're being forced into a wasteland." "We're being forced to rely on ourselves," Lisa corrected. "No council regulations, no bureaucracy, no species telling us what we can and cannot do. They think they're weakening us, but they're actually giving us exactly what we need to become stronger." Daniel wanted to believe her. He wanted to feel the hope she was trying to project, but all he could feel was anger and loss. The convoy reached the quarantine zone 3 weeks later. Automated defense platforms marked the boundary. Beyond them was the Perseus expanse, dark and unknown. "All ships, this is Unity," Lisa broadcast to the fleet. "We cross into unknown space today. The Galactic Council thinks this is our end. They believe we'll struggle and fade into history, but they're wrong. We will survive, we will build, we will thrive. And someday they will realize they should have feared what we would become in freedom, not what we might have done under their control." 200 years had passed since the Great Exodus. The Galactic Council had long forgotten about humanity. In the archives on Prime, old files gathered digital dust. Occasionally, a junior researcher would stumble upon the records of the human exile and wonder what happened to them. Most assumed the primitive species had died out in the harsh Perseus expanse. A few thought perhaps small pockets survived, struggling to maintain their technology. None imagined the truth. Chancellor stood in the same chamber where his predecessor had delivered humanity's sentence. The chamber looked the same. The species were mostly the same, though representatives had changed over the decades. But the mood was different now. Where there had once been confidence, there was now worry. "The Empire continues to expand," Commander reported. The officer was elderly now, his scales faded to pale gray. "They have taken 3 more systems in the past cycle. Our fleets cannot match their numbers." "We should negotiate," suggested Ambassador Lyra of the Collective. Her crystalline form dimmed with concern. "Perhaps we can find terms acceptable to both sides." "The do not negotiate," replied. "They conquer, they have made that clear." The council chamber fell into worried silence. For 2 centuries, the council had maintained peace through diplomacy and mutual cooperation. But the Empire had emerged from the outer reaches of the galaxy with vast fleets and aggressive intentions. They wanted council territory, and they were strong enough to take it. "We need more ships," said. "More weapons, more soldiers." "That takes time we do not have," replied. "They advance faster than we can build." While the council debated, far from Prime, a science vessel named the Luminous drifted near the old quarantine zone. The ship was small, designed for research rather than combat. Its commander, Susan Park, was studying unusual readings her sensors had detected. "These energy signatures make no sense," she told her science officer. They're too powerful, too focused. Could be a natural phenomenon, the science officer suggested. A pulsar, perhaps, or unusual stellar activity. Susan shook her head. No, look at the pattern. It's too regular, too organized. She the readings on her display. It's coming from beyond the quarantine zone, from the Perseus expanse. The science officer looked uncomfortable. Commander, that region was designated forbidden. The automated defenses are still active. I know, Susan said, but these readings are fascinating. Whatever is generating that energy is using technology I've never seen before. Should we report to the council? Susan considered. Not yet. Let's gather more data first, prepare a reconnaissance drone. We'll send it through the quarantine zone for a closer look. The drone launched an hour later. It was small, barely 2 meters long, equipped with advanced sensors and a quantum communication link. Susan watched her displays as the drone approached the invisible boundary of the quarantine zone. Crossing the line in 3, 2, 1, the science officer counted down. The drone passed through without incident. The old defense platforms did not react. Susan felt a moment of relief. Perhaps the automated systems had finally broken down after 2 centuries. Drone is functioning normally, the science officer reported. All sensors active, beginning sweep of the region. Susan leaned forward, watching the data stream in. She saw barren planets, she saw asteroid fields, she saw the expected emptiness of the Perseus expanse, but she also saw something else, something that should not exist. What is that? She whispered. On her display, faint traces appeared. Energy signatures, not natural, not random, organized, structured, coming from deep within the expanse. Could the humans still be out there? The science officer asked. Impossible, Susan replied. They would have struggled just to survive. They certainly couldn't have advanced their technology. These readings suggest something far more sophisticated than what humanity had 200 years ago. The drone moved deeper into the expanse. The readings grew stronger. Susan felt excitement building. This was a discovery that could change everything. Whatever was out there, it was significant. Then the drone's signal vanished. What happened? Susan demanded. The science officer worked frantically at his console. Unknown, the drone just disappeared. No warning, no malfunction. It was there and then it wasn't. Show me the last transmission. The science officer brought up the final seconds of data. Susan watched the readings spike. Energy levels jumped impossibly high. The drone had detected something approaching, something fast, something that moved with purpose. Then nothing. We need to leave, Susan said quietly. Now. Commanders. That drone was intercepted. Something out there detected it and destroyed it, something that doesn't want to be observed. Susan looked at her officer. Bring the Luminous to full power, set course back to Council space. Maximum speed. The vessel turned and accelerated away from the quarantine zone. Behind them, space seemed empty, but Susan could not shake the feeling that something was watching them go. She filed her report 3 days later. The Council received it with skepticism. Probably just equipment failure, one representative said. Or natural phenomena, another added. The Perseus expanse is known for unusual energy patterns. Susan insisted her readings were accurate. She explained the organized nature of the signals. She described how the drone was destroyed. But the Council was too busy with the threat to worry about mysteries in a forbidden region. Only Chancellor seemed interested. He reviewed Susan's data personally. Something about it troubled him. He pulled up the old files on humanity. He read the records of the exile. He studied the reports filed by 2 centuries ago. Do we have any probes in the Perseus region? He asked his assistant. The automated monitoring network, Chancellor, but most of those probes stopped functioning decades ago. When did they stop? The assistant checked. The first failures occurred about 150 years ago. Within 50 years, nearly all the probes in that sector had gone offline. Felt something cold settle in his chest. 150 years ago. That was 50 years after the human exile, long enough for humans to establish themselves, long enough to start expanding again, long enough to begin removing surveillance. Could they have survived? He wondered aloud. Who, Chancellor? The humans, could they still be out there? The assistant looked doubtful. Unlikely, Chancellor. The Perseus expanse is harsh. They would have had to overcome incredible challenges just to maintain their civilization, let alone grow. But not impossible. Not impossible, the assistant admitted, but highly improbable. Returned to studying Susan's data. The energy signatures were sophisticated, more sophisticated than Council technology. That should not be possible for a species that had been exiled to a resource-poor region of space. Unless that species had been forced to innovate, unless isolation had pushed them to develop new technologies, unless being cast out had made them stronger instead of weaker. Thought about's words from 200 years ago. Humanity will struggle to survive, you will be forgotten. What if it had been wrong? Deep in the Perseus expanse, on a world called New Terra, an old man sat in a comfortable chair and watched the sunset. Brandon Cole was 132 years old. Medical advances had extended human considerably. He was among the last surviving humans who remembered the exile. He remembered standing on Earth as a young man and watching the ships depart. He remembered the fear and anger. He remembered the Council's judgment. He remembered everything. A younger woman entered the room. "Grandfather, the Council is meeting. They want your vote." Brandon turned his chair to face her. "What's the issue?" "Whether to reveal ourselves to the galactic community. The younger generation thinks it's time. They want to rejoin the galaxy." Brandon was quiet for a long moment. Outside, the sun set over New Terra's capital city. The buildings gleamed with advanced materials. Flying vehicles moved between towers. In the distance, massive shipyards orbited the planet, constructing vessels that would have amazed the old Galactic Council. "What do you think we should do?" he asked his granddaughter. "I think we've been hiding long enough," she replied. "We're strong now, we have nothing to fear from them anymore." "It's not about fear," Brandon said. "It's about principle. They cast us out. They called us dangerous and primitive. They forced us to leave everything we had built. Why should we go back to them?" "Because the galaxy is bigger than old grudges," his granddaughter said gently. "Because there are innocent people out there who don't deserve to suffer because their ancestors made a mistake. Because we're better than revenge." Brandon smiled. "You sound like your mother. She always was the wise one in the family." He pushed himself up from his chair. "Very well, tell the Council I vote for observation, not revelation. Let's watch the galactic community. If they truly need help, we'll consider it, but we don't owe them anything." "I'll tell them," his granddaughter said. After she left, Brandon returned to watching the sunset. 200 years ago, the Galactic Council had called humanity dangerous. They had called them primitive. They had exiled them to die. But humanity had not died. They had thrived. They had built a civilization beyond anything the Council could. The border station Aurora 7 had stood watch over the Council's frontier for 30 years. It was not a military fortress, just a scientific outpost that monitored space traffic and relayed communications. 300 people lived and worked there, representing a dozen different species. They considered their posting boring but safe. Then the Empire arrived. "All stations, this is Aurora 7. Commander Jenna Wright's voice was desperate over the emergency channel. "We are under attack. Repeat, we are under attack. Battle fleet detected. Request immediate assistance." The ships appeared out of nowhere, dozens of massive warships surrounding the station. Their weapons charged with an ominous glow. They did not bother with warnings or demands. They simply opened fire. Aurora 7's shields held for exactly 43 seconds. Then they collapsed under the overwhelming assault. Explosions tore through the station's outer ring. Hull breaches vented atmosphere into space. People ran for escape pods. Jenna stayed at her post, sending distress signals even as the station fell apart around her. "This is Aurora 7. We are evacuating. Hull integrity at 20%. Council response fleets are too far away. Somebody please help us." The commander watched the station burn and felt satisfaction. This was just the beginning. The Empire would sweep through Council space like wildfire. These soft, weak species would fall before strength. Then his sensors detected something impossible. "Commander, unknown vessels approaching from bearing 270. The commander checked his displays. 3 ships appeared on his sensors. They were coming from the direction of the Perseus expanse, from empty space that should contain nothing but barren worlds. The ships were sleek, smaller than warships, but moving with incredible speed. "Identify those vessels," the commander ordered. "Unknown configuration. not matching any database entries. They're broadcasting on old communication frequencies, ancient protocols. The lead ship sent a message. The translation software struggled with the archaic format, but the words came through clearly enough. Attention fleet. This is the HSS Endeavor. Stand down immediately and cease your attack on the civilian station. The commander laughed, 3 small ships daring to challenge his entire fleet. Ignore them, continue the assault. What happened next would be discussed in military academies for generations. The 3 human ships moved with precision that seemed impossible. They split up, each taking a different vector. Weapons fire lanced out from their hulls, bright blue beams that struck with surgical accuracy. Warships tried to target them, but the human vessels moved too fast, too unpredictably. One cruiser exploded as its reactor was hit. Another spun out of control as its engines were destroyed. A third went dark as its power systems failed. Within minutes, a dozen ships were disabled. "What are those weapons?" the commander shouted. "How are they doing this?" His tactical officer had no answers. The human ships used technology that should not exist. Their energy weapons cut through shields as if they were not there. Their maneuverability physics as they understood it. Martinez sat in the command chair of the HSS Endeavor and felt calm satisfaction. His crew worked efficiently around him. They had trained for years for moments like this. They were strong by Council standards, but Council standards were 2 centuries out of date. "Status on Aurora 7, he asked. "Station is stabilizing, Captain. Most civilians have evacuated. Human medical teams are standing by to assist." Nodded, broadcast to the fleet. "Tell them they have 1 chance to withdraw. If they fire again, we will disable every ship they have." The message was sent. The commander stared at his displays in disbelief. Half his fleet was already crippled. These 3 small ships had done what should have been impossible. "Withdraw," he ordered his remaining vessels. "Full retreat." The ships turned and fled. Did not pursue them. That would come later. Right now, people needed help. "Deploy rescue shuttles. Coordinate with Aurora 7's evacuation. And send a message to Admiral. Tell her the situation is under control." The human ships moved to assist the damaged station. Their shuttles carried medical equipment and supplies. Their engineers helped seal hull breaches. Their doctors treated the wounded. Jenna Wright stood on Aurora 7's main command deck and watched through the viewport. Human ships hung in space, their clean lines and advanced design making them look like something from a dream. Shuttles moved between the station and the ships. People were being saved. "Who are they?" her assistant asked. "I don't know," Jenna replied, "but they just saved our lives." 2 days later, Council response fleets finally arrived. Admiral of the fleet expected to find wreckage and casualties. Instead, he found 3 unknown ships keeping watch over the damaged station. Medical teams were working to save the injured. Engineers were making repairs. "This is Admiral to unknown vessels. Identify yourselves." His face appeared on display. The Admiral stared. A human, that was definitely a human, but how? Where had they come from? "Admiral, I am Captain Martinez of the Human Space Service. We responded to Aurora 7's distress call. The fleet has been driven off. Most of the station's population survived." Could not speak for several seconds. Finally, he found his voice. "Human, you're from Earth." "From New Terra, actually. Though my ancestors were from Earth, yes." "But that's impossible. Humanity was exiled 200 years ago. The Council believed you all died out or regressed to primitive technology." Smiled slightly. The Council believed many things, most of them were wrong. Over the next 3 hours, more human ships arrived. Sleek destroyers, advanced cruisers, vessels that made Council warships look primitive by comparison. Admiral found himself surrounded by a technology that should not exist. Arrived on the HSS Constellation, a massive flagship that dwarfed any ship in its fleet. She was a tall woman with gray hair and the bearing of someone who had commanded fleets for decades. She requested a meeting on Aurora 7. The conference room was crowded. Admiral sat across from. Beside him were representatives from the Collective, and half a dozen other species. All of them stared at the human Admiral as if she was a ghost. "How?" finally asked. "How did you do this? How did humanity not only survive but advance so far?" Leaned back in her chair. "We had no choice. The Perseus expanse is harsh. We had to innovate or die. We chose to innovate." But your technology, a representative said, it's generations beyond ours. That should have taken centuries. It did, replied. 2 centuries. We worked hard. We didn't have the luxury of stagnation. I don't understand. Looked around the room. Let me tell you what happened after the exile. We arrived in the Perseus expanse with whatever we could carry. We found hostile worlds. We found limited resources. We found a region of space that would kill us if we were weak. She paused, making sure everyone was listening. So we adapted. We learned to terraform hostile planets faster and more efficiently. We developed new propulsion systems to connect our scattered colonies. We created advanced recycling technology because we couldn't waste anything. Every challenge pushed us to find solutions. Every problem made us stronger. But surely you had limitations, said. Resources, knowledge, equipment. We did, agreed. So we became creative. We learned to do more with less. We built better. We thought differently. And we didn't have council regulations slowing us down. Every scientist could explore any idea. Every engineer could test any design. Innovation happened at a pace you can't imagine. You were isolated, the representative said. How did you gain knowledge? We explored, we discovered, we learned, smiled. And we found others, species that had been exiled or fled from their own regions. We formed alliances, we shared knowledge. The Perseus expanse became home to dozens of species working together. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Humanity had not died in exile. They had thrived. They had built something remarkable. Why did you come back? Asked quietly. You could have stayed hidden. You owe the council nothing. True, said. But Aurora 7 was full of innocent people, scientists, engineers, families. They didn't exile us. Their ancestors did. We don't punish children for their parents' mistakes. So you came to help. We came because it was right, corrected. The Empire threatens innocent lives. We have the power to stop them, so we will. Felt ashamed. His ancestors had voted to exile humanity. They had condemned an entire species to hardship and possible death. And now, 200 years later, that same species was saving council lives. What do you want from us? He asked. Right now, nothing, replied. We'll help you with after that we can discuss the future. The council will want to meet with you, formally. I expect they will, said. Send a message to Chancellor. Tell him humanity requests permission to enter council space. Tell him we have much to discuss. As the meeting ended, watched leave. She moved with confidence, with strength. She was everything the council had feared humanity might become. But she was also offering help when the council desperately needed it. That night, a message reached Prime. Chancellor read it 3 times before he believed what it said. Then he called an emergency session of the council. Humanity has returned, he announced to the gathered representatives. They are not only alive, but far more advanced than we imagined. They have offered to help us against the Empire. The chamber erupted in shocked voices. Some representatives refused to believe it. Others demanded proof. A few sat in stunned silence. Displayed the data from Aurora 7. He showed images of human ships. He played recordings of their weapons in action. He presented evidence that could not be. We must decide, said. Do we accept their help? Do we allow them back into council space after 200 years? The debate raged for hours. Some species wanted to refuse out of pride. Others recognized the necessity. In the end, survival won over pride. The neutral station Harmony was chosen for the negotiations. It orbited a lifeless moon halfway between council space and the Perseus expanse. The station had been built decades ago for trade, negotiations, and diplomatic meetings. Now it hosted the most important gathering in 200 years. Arrived with a small delegation. She wore her dress uniform, dark blue with silver insignia that marked her rank. Behind her walked Admiral Foster, humanities diplomatic specialist. Several military advisors accompanied them, along with technical experts who understood human technology. The council delegation was much larger. Chancellor led them, flanked by representatives from every major species. Admiral was there, still processing what he had witnessed at Aurora 7. Commander had insisted on attending despite his advanced age. Susan Park, the who had detected the energy signatures, watched everything with bright, curious eyes. But one figure caught attention immediately. A young officer stood among the council representatives. His posture was stiff, his 4 arms held formally at his sides. His nameplate identified him as Drake. recognized that name. The Drake family had a history with humanity. His grandfather had been one of the loudest voices demanding human exile. The young officer clearly knew this too. His expression was carefully neutral, but could see the tension in his stance. "Welcome," Chancellor said as they gathered in the main conference hall. "Thank you for coming." "Thank you for inviting us," replied smoothly. "Though I admit the circumstances are unfortunate." "The threat grows daily," said. "We need your help." "Let's be direct," interrupted. "You need more than help. You need us to save you. Your fleets cannot match your technology is insufficient. Without our intervention, the Empire will conquer Council space within 2 standard years." The blunt assessment made several Council representatives bristle. Drake's scales darkened with anger. "You speak as if we are helpless," he said. Turned her gaze to him. "You are, against at least, that's not an insult, it's simply fact." "My grandfather always said humans were arrogant," replied. "I see he was correct." "Your grandfather voted to exile my people," said calmly. "He condemned millions to potential death, so forgive me if I don't particularly care about his opinions." The room fell silent, shot a warning look, but she ignored it. This conversation needed honesty, not diplomacy. Raised one hand. "Please, we are here to discuss cooperation, not to rehash old grievances." "Are we?" asked. "Because from where I stand, the Council is asking humanity to save them from a threat they cannot handle. That requires trust, and trust requires acknowledging the past." "What do you want?" asked. "An apology." "I want recognition," replied. "Recognition that the Council was wrong. Recognition that humanity survived and thrived despite your attempts to break us. Recognition that we are here offering help not because we owe you anything, but because it's the right thing to do." Was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded. "You are correct. The Council made a terrible mistake 200 years ago. We judged humanity based on fear rather than reason. We condemned your species for crimes they had not committed. For that, on behalf of the current Council, I apologize." It was not enough. It could never be enough for 200 years of exile, but it was a start. "Apology accepted," said. "Now let's discuss the—" They moved to the tactical displays. Human advisors brought up maps of movements. The situation was worse than the Council had realized. Fleets were massing in 3 sectors simultaneously. They planned a coordinated assault that would overwhelm Council defenses. "When will they attack?" asked. "Within 15 standard days," said. "Our intelligence networks have been monitoring them for months." "You've been watching us," said accusingly, "spying on Council space." "Of course we have," replied without apology. "We knew they were becoming aggressive. We wanted to understand the threat. Would you prefer we remained ignorant?" Did not answer. The planning took 3 days. Human strategists laid out a defensive plan that made Council military leaders uncomfortable. It required them to defer to human command. It required them to trust human tactics. It required them to admit that humanity knew better. "This is ridiculous," finally said during one heated discussion. "We have fought battles for centuries. We don't need humans telling us how to defend our own space." "Your tactics are outdated," said bluntly. "Your strategies are predictable. They have studied you for years. They know how you fight. They know how you think. If you want to survive, you need to fight differently. And humans know better." "In this case, yes," pulled up a tactical display. "Look at this. Your standard defensive formation places heavy ships in the center with lighter vessels providing support. It's logical. It's sound. It's exactly what they expect. They've planned their entire assault around that formation." She changed the display, showing the human alternative. "We propose splitting your fleet into rapid response groups. Smaller, faster, more flexible. We use human ships as force multipliers, supporting your vessels with advanced weapons and shields. They won't expect it. They won't know how to counter it." "It could work," admitted reluctantly. "But it requires perfect coordination. If one group fails, the entire defense collapses." "That's why we practice," said. "We have 12 days before the attack. We use that time to train our forces together. Your crews learn to work with ours. We develop signals. We coordinate movements. By the time they arrive, we'll be ready." The debate continued, but could see opinions shifting. Desperation was a powerful motivator. The Council needed to win. Pride was less important than survival. On the 5th day, Drake requested a private meeting with They met in one of the station's observation lounges. Through the viewport, stars shone against the darkness. "My grandfather died believing he had saved the galaxy," said without preamble. "He thought exiling humanity protected civilized space from dangerous primitives." "He was wrong," said simply. "I know," turned to face her. "I read the historical records. I studied the exile. I wanted to understand why my family name is associated with one of the Council's greatest mistakes." "And what did you learn?" "That fear makes us stupid," replied. "The Council feared human ambition. They feared human growth. So they chose exile instead of cooperation. They created the very threat they imagined by forcing humanity to develop in isolation." Nodded. "That's a fair assessment. I want you to know that not all of us agree with what was done. Many of us recognize the injustice. Many of us are ashamed." "Shame doesn't change the past," said, "but actions can shape the future. You can choose to be different than your grandfather." Was quiet for a moment. "How did you do it? How did humanity advance so far in just 200 years? It was the question everyone wanted answered. Had given vague responses before, but she found herself wanting to be honest with. "We had to," she said simply. "The Perseus expanse is harsh. Radiation levels are high. Resources are limited. Habitable worlds are rare. We arrived with limited supplies and desperate refugees. We could either innovate or die. But innovation takes time. It takes resources. It takes need," corrected. "When your children are starving, you find ways to grow food in hostile soil. When your ships are failing, you develop better propulsion. When your colonies are threatened by radiation, you create advanced shielding. Every problem became an opportunity. Every failure taught us something. And your isolation helped." "Yes," admitted. "No council regulations restricting research. No bureaucracy slowing decisions. Every scientist could pursue any idea. Every engineer could test any theory. We failed often, but we learned from every failure." "You also mentioned other species, allies." Smiled. "The Perseus expanse attracted refugees from across the galaxy, species that had been exiled or fled persecution. We found them struggling to survive. We helped them. They helped us. We shared knowledge and built together. Our greatest advances came from cooperation between species." "The Council preaches cooperation," said, "but we never truly practiced it. We remained separate, competitive." "That's your weakness," said. "They are strong because they are united. Humanity is strong because we learn to work with others. The Council is weak because every species protects its own interests first." Nodded slowly. "Will you help us change that?" "That depends. Are you willing to change?" "I am," said. "I can't speak for the entire Council, but I will do everything I can." The attack came on the 14th day. Fleets appeared in 3 sectors simultaneously, just as human intelligence had predicted. Hundreds of warships moved in coordinated assault patterns. The commander expected swift victory. Instead, they found something new. Council ships did not form traditional defensive lines. They split into rapid response groups, each supported by human vessels. When ships attacked one position, they found themselves flanked by forces they had not detected. Human weapons tore through shields. Council ships struck from unexpected angles. The battle raged for 6 hours. They fought hard, but they could not adapt fast enough. Human technology proved decisive. Advanced sensors detected movements before they happened. Precision weapons disabled enemy ships without destroying them. Quantum displacement technology moved ships instantly across the battlefield. When they finally retreated, they left behind dozens of disabled vessels. Council casualties were minimal. The victory was complete. On the HSS Constellation, watched the battlefield displays and felt satisfaction. They had proven their point. Humanity and the Council could work together. They could win together. Drake contacted her from his ship. "Admiral, on behalf of the Council forces, thank you. Your tactics saved countless lives." "It was a joint effort," replied. "Your people fought well." "They fought better because you showed them how." Paused. "My grandfather was wrong about many things, but he was right about one. Humanity is dangerous, just not in the way he thought." "How so?" "You're dangerous because you refuse to accept limitations. You're dangerous because you turn adversity into advantage. You're dangerous because you prove that greatness comes from choosing to be better, not from conquering others." Invitation came 3 weeks after the battle. Chancellor requested that council representatives visit New Terra, humanity's capital world deep in the Perseus expanse. It would be the first time any council ships had entered that region in 200 years. Led the convoy of council vessels through the old quarantine zone. The automated defense platforms were still there, but now they recognized council transponder codes. Human engineers had quietly updated them years ago, preparing for this possibility. Drake stood on the bridge of his ship and watched the stars change as they entered the Perseus expanse. He had studied the old records. This region was supposed to be hostile and barren, a wasteland where humanity should have struggled to survive. The first planet they passed proved those records wrong. It was a thriving world covered in cities that gleamed in the sunlight. Orbital stations ringed it like jewels. Ships moved in organized traffic patterns. This was not a struggling colony. This was a developed civilization. "How many worlds do humans control?" asked. 43 colonized planets, replied from her own ship. Another 67 stations and outposts. Our population is approximately 18 billion across all territories. Could not hide his shock. 18 billion. Humanity had not just survived, they had exploded in growth. They approached New Terra 3 days later. The planet was beautiful. Blue oceans covered 60% of its surface. Green landmasses showed careful terraforming. White clouds drifted through a clean atmosphere. It looked more habitable than many core council worlds. The capital city was built along a massive bay. Towers of advanced materials reached toward the sky. Flying vehicles moved between buildings in organized streams. Parks and gardens provided green spaces throughout the urban landscape. Everything was clean, efficient, and remarkably advanced. Chancellor's shuttle landed at the primary spaceport. He emerged to find a welcoming committee waiting. At the center stood Sharon Morgan, Prime Minister of the Human Federation. She was in her 50s, with dark hair and the same confident bearing that displayed. "Chancellor," Sharon said, extending her hand in the human greeting. "Welcome to New Terra." Carefully took her hand. "Prime Minister Morgan, thank you for hosting us." "It's long overdue," Sharon replied. "Please follow me, we have much to show you." The tour took 2 full days. Sharon and her advisors showed the council delegation everything. Manufacturing facilities that produced advanced materials, research centers where scientists from a dozen species worked together, medical facilities using technology that made council medicine look primitive, universities training the next generation of engineers and doctors and explorers. But it was the shipyards that truly amazed them. Massive orbital platforms constructed vessels that would have been impossible by council standards. Workers from multiple species coordinated complex assembly procedures. Automated systems handled precision work that required perfect accuracy. "How did you build all this?" asked as they stood in an observation deck overlooking the shipyards. "Necessity," Sharon replied, "and cooperation. When we arrived in the Perseus expanse, we had very little. We needed ships to explore. We needed stations to process resources. We needed facilities to support our population, so we built them." "But the technology required," a representative said. "The knowledge, the materials, the expertise." "We developed it," Sharon said simply. "Our scientists studied the problems, our engineers designed solutions, our workers built what was needed. Every challenge taught us something. Every success pushed us to aim higher." Drake had been quiet throughout the tour. Now he spoke. "Prime Minister, may I ask a direct question?" "Of course." "Your civilization is clearly more advanced than the Council. Your military is stronger. Your technology is superior. You could easily conquer us if you wished. Why don't you?" Sharon met his gaze. "Because that's not who we are. The Council exiled us because they feared we would be conquerors. They assumed that given power we would abuse it. They were wrong." "How can we be sure?" "You can't," Sharon said honestly. "Not completely, but I can tell you this. Humanity learned something important during our exile. We learned that strength is not the same as domination. Power is not the same as oppression. We became strong not to rule others, but to protect ourselves and those we care about." She gestured toward the window, toward the planet below. "Look at New Terra. Look at our other worlds. We didn't conquer them. We built them. We didn't enslave other species. We cooperated with them. Our greatest achievements came from working together, not from forcing others to submit." "But you could still choose to conquer," persisted. "We could," Sharon agreed. Any species with sufficient power could make that choice. The question is not whether we have the capability. The question is whether we have the character to choose better. I believe we do. Our history proves it. Thought about her words. He thought about everything he had seen. The Council had feared human aggression. They had exiled humanity to prevent potential conquest. But in doing so, they had missed the truth. Humanity's danger was never in their willingness to conquer. It was in their refusal to be limited. You said necessity drove your advancement, said. Can you be more specific? Sharon nodded and led them to a conference room. Holographic displays activated, showing the history of human development in the Perseus expanse. When we arrived, we faced immediate challenges, Sharon explained. Radiation levels were high across most systems. Our first colonies struggled with crop failures. Our ships broke down frequently. People were dying. The displays showed early human settlements. They looked rough, temporary, desperate. We needed better radiation shielding, so our scientists studied the problem. They discovered new materials that could block higher energy particles. Those materials led to advances in ship hull design. Better hulls meant we could explore deeper into the expanse. The displays shifted, showing the progression of technology. We needed reliable food sources. Our agricultural experts experimented with genetic modifications. They developed crops that could grow in harsh conditions. That research led to breakthroughs in biological engineering. Those breakthroughs helped us terraform hostile worlds faster. More images appeared, showing barren planets transformed into livable worlds. We needed energy. Solar panels were insufficient in many systems. We had to develop fusion reactors more efficient than anything we had before. That research led to advances in power generation that changed everything. Suddenly, we had energy to spare. The displays showed power grids, fusion plants, energy distribution networks. Every problem connected to another solution. Every solution opened new possibilities. Within 50 years, we had developed technology that would have taken the Council centuries. Within 100 years, we had surpassed what the Council achieved in. But how, pressed? Knowledge requires time, research requires resources, development requires stability. You had none of those things. We had something better, Sharon replied. We had urgency, we had focus, we had freedom. Freedom? The Council has regulations, Sharon explained. Rules about what can be researched, restrictions on dangerous experiments, bureaucracy that slows development. We had none of that. If an idea might help us survive, we tested it. If an experiment might yield results, we tried it. We failed often, but we learned from every failure. That sounds dangerous, said. It was, Sharon admitted. We lost people to accidents, we had disasters, we made mistakes. But those mistakes taught us to be careful without being paralyzed. We learned to take calculated risks instead of avoiding all risk. Spoke again. You also mentioned cooperation with other species. Who did you find in the Perseus expanse? Sharon smiled and gestured to the room's entrance. Several figures entered. They represented species did not recognize. One was tall and thin with skin that shimmered like oil. Another was short and broad with multiple eyes arranged around its head. A third looked almost plant-like with leaves instead of hair. These are representatives of our allied species, Sharon said. They were exiled by their own people for refusing to follow authoritarian rule. They fled persecution in their home sector. They are refugees from a species that destroyed there. We found them struggling to survive. We helped them. They helped us. The representative stepped forward. Humanity saved my people. We were dying when they found us. They shared food. They provided medical care. They gave us hope. In return, they taught us advanced sensor technology, Sharon said. They shared their expertise in materials science. They understood biological systems better than any species we had met. Together, we achieved what none of us could have done alone. This is what the Council should have been, said quietly. True cooperation, true unity. It still can be, Sharon replied, if you're willing to change. That evening, Sharon hosted a formal dinner. Council representatives mingled with humans and allied species. Conversations flowed. Ideas were exchanged. For the first time in centuries, genuine cooperation felt possible. Brandon Cole attended despite his age. He sat at the head table, watching everything with eyes that had seen the beginning and might now see a new chapter. Drake approached him during the meal. Mr. Cole, I understand you were present during the exile. I was, Brandon confirmed. I watched the ships leave Earth. I was young then, angry, scared. Do you still feel that anger? Brandon considered the question. No, I felt it for many years. I wanted revenge. I wanted to prove the Council wrong. But eventually I realized something important. What? The Council gave us a gift, Brandon said. They didn't mean to. They thought they were punishing us, but they freed us from their limitations. They forced us to rely on ourselves. They made us prove what we were capable of. Without the exile, humanity might still be struggling to meet Council standards, trying to fit into their mold. So you forgive them? Forgiveness implies we were victims, Brandon said. We weren't. We were challenged. We rose to that challenge. I thank the Council for that. Felt something shift inside him. His whole life, he had carried shame for his grandfather's vote. He had seen the exile as a terrible mistake that needed to be apologized for. But Brandon Cole saw it differently. He saw it as the catalyst that transformed humanity. The next day, the formal agreements were signed. Humanity would be granted full membership in the Galactic Council. Trade agreements would be established. Technology exchanges would begin. Joint defense pacts would protect both human and Council space from threats like the... But more importantly, both sides committed to learning from each other. The Council would study human innovation and adaptability. Humanity would share the wisdom of cooperation they had built with their allied species. Together, they would create something new, something better than what either had achieved alone. As the Council delegation prepared to depart, approached Sharon for a final private conversation. Prime Minister, I want to thank you, not just for helping us against the, but for showing us what we could become. We all have room to grow, Sharon replied. 200 years ago, my predecessor stood in the council chamber and condemned your species. He said you were dangerous. He said you had to be removed. Paused. He was right that you were dangerous, but wrong about why. How so? You're dangerous because you show us our own limitations. You're dangerous because you prove that greatness comes from overcoming adversity, not from avoiding it. You're dangerous because you challenge us to be better than we are. Sharon smiled. I hope we can continue to be that kind of dangerous together. The council ships departed New Terra that afternoon. Drake stood on his bridge and looked back at the planet. He thought about his grandfather. He thought about the vote 200 years ago. He thought about everything that had happened since. His grandfather had wanted to protect the galaxy from humanity. Instead, he had unleashed humanity's full potential. He had forced them to become something remarkable. Smiled, sometimes the greatest gifts came wrapped in hardship. Sometimes the best thing that could happen was being forced to prove yourself. On New Terra, Brandon Cole sat in his garden and watched the sunset one more time. He was old now, very old. His body was failing, but his mind was sharp and his memories were clear. He remembered Daniel Carson standing in the council chamber, receiving humanity's sentence. He remembered Lisa Morgan's determination. He remembered the fear and anger of the Exodus. He remembered everything. But mostly he remembered what came after, the struggles, the innovations, the achievements, the moment when humanity realized they were not going to merely survive but thrive. The council had tried to break them. Instead, they had forged them into something stronger. Brandon Cole closed his eyes and smiled. Humanity had proven itself, not through conquest, not through domination, but through refusing to accept limitations, through choosing cooperation over revenge, through building something worth being proud of. The exile was over, the future was beginning, and it was going to be remarkable. Smiled, I'll take that as a compliment. It is, said, the highest compliment I can give. The council sent its response. Humanity was welcome to return. An official meeting would be arranged. On the HSS Constellation, read the message and allowed herself a small smile. 200 years ago, the council had cast humanity out. Now they were begging for help. The irony was not lost on her. They had taken the harsh worlds of the Perseus expanse and made them home. They had developed technology that would make the council weep with envy. And soon, very soon, the galaxy would learn what humanity had become in exile. Brandon Cole smiled at the thought, had been right about one thing. Humanity was dangerous, but not in the way the council had feared. They were dangerous because they refused to give up. They were dangerous because exile had made them stronger. They were dangerous because they had learned to thrive where others would have died. The council would learn that lesson soon enough. The Unity passed through the quarantine zone. The defense platforms hummed but did not fire. One by one, the human ships followed. They left behind the civilization that rejected them and headed into darkness. Daniel Carson stood at the viewport and watched the quarantine zone disappear behind them. He thought about Swords. He thought about the Council's fear. And for the first time since the vote, he smiled. They had made a terrible mistake, and humanity would prove it.